The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. The mother of Jesus and his brothers came to the house where he was, and standing outside they said to him and called him. A crowd was sitting around him, and they said to him, "Your mother and your brothers and sisters are outside asking for you." And he replied, "Who are my mother and my brothers?" And looking at those who sat around him, he said, "Here are my mother and my brothers. Whoever does the will of God is my brother and sister and mother." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
Today we celebrate the memorial of St. Francis de Sales. He was born in France in 1567. He obtained 2 doctorates, one in civil law, one in canon law, by the time he was 24. Then he decided to go into religious life and was appointed Bishop of Geneva in 1602. And he set about to reorganize the diocese, establish religious education, and established a seminary and founded various schools. He is important because he lived at the time just after the Protestant Reformation. So he was one of the principal leaders of the Catholic Counter-Reformation and lived around the city of Geneva, which was basically a Calvinist city. He made it his mission to evangelize and teach those who had left the church. And he was one of the first to write little pamphlets which he would place under the doors of the homes of those who had left the church, and just summarizing the faith. And it is believed that he successfully converted over 40,000 back into the Catholic Church. He was a very gifted spiritual director, and he directed the future saint and mystic Jane de Chantal. He emphasized that the call to holiness was for everyone, not just religious, but all lay people. And in that way, he anticipated Vatican II and their great call to universal holiness. He wrote the famous Introduction to the Devout Life for ordinary lay people like ourselves. He emphasized prayer, meditation, and in that way he established order. And in that very tumultuous period of instability, that was very important. And it's important for us today because we live in a period of great instability, as you know, with identity politics, cancel culture, the psychologizing of the self, the denial of human nature, and any external objective order and truth, especially from Christ and his church, but rather only subjective feelings. In other words, the dominant culture today maintains there's no inherent truth. The world is meaningless except for the meaning that we project onto it. In that kind of woke culture, we are called to be reformers, to bring people back to the truth of the Catholic Church and the solidity of the teaching of Christ and the saints. We have a great example today because and I'm sure you have read that wonderful book, Introduction to Devout Life, St. Francis de Sales leads us back into this way in which we can be grounded in charity, love, reason, faith, and that's a great witness to our culture. In today's readings, we have a great set of principles from the first reading, Hebrews chapter 10, where it's stated that God so loved the world, he sent Jesus Christ in order that he would sacrifice himself, lay down his body for the sake of truth and for our salvation. And that's why we come to Mass, because Christ will be on the altar and we will partake in his body and blood, hear obviously the gospel, and then, as Jesus says in today's gospel from Mark chapter 3, his family are those who do his will, the will of Christ. We are his family. We're here, and we're asking St. Francis de Sales to pray for us as we immerse ourselves into the teachings of Christ and his church. So I invite you, as I'm sure you're doing, to read the Bible every day, especially the Gospel, meditate on it, and the Catechism, so that we are grounded in that stable truth, objective truth, the truth that comes from God, and then in that stable knowledge and love, be witnesses to a culture that is fragmenting and so fluid that we're not sure where it's going next. So St. Francis de Sales, pray for us.